the topic Plan, Forecast and Analyze, Strengthening Procurement Decision Making with Analytics. And for this, I would like to invite on stage Ms. Neha Sorathia, who is Director Supply Planning at 𝗵𝗶𝘁𝗄𝗏 Corp. Giving a brief introduction, Ms. Neha is an award-winning leader with 15 plus years of experience driving supply chain strategy, integrated business planning and operations for retail and CPG companies across the globe. Currently, she is leading the supply chain function and driving supply chain transformation projects. With this, please welcome her with a huge round of applause.
The brands that 𝗵𝗶𝘁 own is Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. I'm going to be talking about something that is a little bit different from what we've heard since morning, right? And somebody said, broaden your horizons beyond procurement. So I'm going to talk to you about planning, which is, go hand in hand with procurement and maybe take some questions at the end to see if, people have any insights about what I share. So the agenda for today, we'll talk about broader digital supply chain and what the path towards it looks like. Planning in apparel supply chain, what is the current state, what the future state looks like, and where does digital network or digital transformation play a role in that, and how prepared are we as leaders to manage that change or maybe thrive in that change, right? First of all, how many of you worked in apparel in the past or are, I see a couple of hands, so I'm not going to bluff too much. I'll try and be real. All right. So path towards digital supply chain, right? If we were to talk about technology and people versus timeline, right? The first step here is automation, right? Which is what we heard a lot about, Internet of Things, RPA, augmented intelligence. The one key thing here, right, is Gen Z. They're called the digital natives today, right? And you'll see them entering the workforce fairly soon, right? And these are the folks this is the generation that's grown up with smartphones, right? These are your sons and daughters, probably your nieces and nephews whose entire life is digital, right? Whether it's on Roblox or whether it's them buying things on your behalf. So, as this generation sort of enters the workforce, we're going to see a lot of acceleration, maybe more than what pandemic brought, into not only supply chain but workforce in general, right? And that's where we'll start seeing more and more automation, because if one thing this generation doesn't have is patience. So we're going to start seeing a lot more transformation. The second step, is, and this comes from Gartner, right? So is augmentation. And when we say augmentation, it's, more maturity in terms of ML exists today. It existed almost a decade ago, right? But when does that technology sort of mature, right? By in the next 7 to 8 years, we will start seeing more and more of use of this, it being ever pervasive, like our transactional technologies are today. Digital twin, I mean, everybody in this room, I'm sure, has heard about supply chain digital twin and the value that it would bring to an organization. Responsible AI, again, an oxymoron in itself, but it's something that we will start seeing become more and more pervasive as well, as especially within the realm of supply chain. And this is where your Gen Z sort of grows up and are in the managerial positions, right? And sort of guide their team to work maybe with an alpha or a beta generation, to get to that point. The third thing, and we heard a lot about it, and if we were to talk more broadly about supply chain, it's, autonomy. And it's a machine making the decisions that you and I are making today, right? And maybe more smartly, maybe not, only time will tell. But that's where, your artificial intelligence is sort of going to reach its peak, which is maybe 2040, 45, maybe earlier, if another pandemic is in the mix. And, this is where probably a lot of us maybe are already retired or maybe out of a job, right, if we don't evolve with time. So this is where your Gen Z will sort of become, the leaders of the world and sort of start guiding the technology and the supply chain the way, way it performs today. So I just wanted to frame it up with, what the supply chain landscape looks like. We'll sort of jump into, planning in apparel, right? And this might be specific to apparel, but, everybody I'm sure will relate to it because we all deal with it today. The first step, obviously, strategic, right? And this is your long-range plan where you're going to decide who you buy from, where you buy from, right? And what your strategic sourcing decisions are. Am I going to move more closer to my consumer? Am I going to still source from China, which is, a year-long lead time, but I still get the best cost possible, right? So those are the kind of decisions that you sort of make 2 to 3 years out. And mind you, apparel supply chain probably has one of the longest lead times across industries, right? We plan somewhere, we buy almost 8 to 9 months ahead of our sell period, right? So today, I'm probably buying for my fall 23, which is next year, October, November timeframe, right? So, and it's not specific to one company or the other. Across the industry, that's the kind of lead times we deal with. This then feeds into your seasonal planning, right, which is more your 6 to 12 month cycle, which I'm sure all of you probably just plan your capacities, make sure you have the raw materials and sort of are ready to execute, right? Third is the more operational time frame, which is more in season. And apparel, those who work in apparel know that pre-season and in season are very, very different dynamic, right? In season is more making sure your suppliers are delivering, making sure your production floors are filled, things like that, right? So this is just, I just wanted to frame up the horizon and, what planning looks like in apparel. Now today, right, and this is just a view of what the apparel supply chain looks like, and I'm sure you all have, your L1s and L2s and L3s and L4s, right? And everybody is looking to understand how they can, connect better with their not only L2 and L3, but all the way down to commodities that we buy. Just to give you a flavor of, you go from cotton, you go into a spinner, you sort of build a fabric, you manufacture a product, you distribute it, you consume it. It is an 8 to 9 month long cycle across the board, very heavily seasonal, right? And the product flow, though, is one way, the information flow is the other way, right? And one key thing to note here is I'm doing this a year in advance, right? So I'm today trying to understand what my consumer is going to buy 1 year from now, right? There is a bullwhip effect. What I am planning, what my distribution is planning, what my manufacturer is planning, what my mill is planning, it explodes, right? And I end up with a ton of inventory, which I don't know what to do. I mark it down for everybody's benefit, and I sell it at 30% lower the price, right? This is, and pandemic sort of accelerated this as well. You were growing digitally, but now, you're competing with the likes of Amazon, the likes of Shein, the likes of Zalando, who make and deliver a product within 2 weeks of time, right? There is demand for personalization. Okay, I want this graphic to be this way. I want this t-shirt to be exactly my size. So there is a lot of competition from non-traditional competitors, and it's all digitally led and digitally managed, right? And the organizations that are not able to evolve will sort of, lose the market share. We talked a lot about this, but, supply chain disruptions, black swan events, especially for a supply chain like apparel and a lot of the others, we are hyper-connected globally, right? My cotton goes from India to Sri Lanka, it becomes a fabric, it goes to Kenya for manufacturing, and it is sold in United States or Europe, right? So it goes through so much carbon footprint, one. It also is so connected that if one chain breaks, I'm not able to deliver to my consumer, right? So we are so connected today that COVID sort of brought out that crack in the system, right? It sort of showed us that, you can't continue to be, reliant on just-in-time systems. You need balance between your just-in-time, and you need to be more resilient, you need to be more agile. And that's going to continue, right? With the way climate change, you saw what happened with floods in Pakistan, it's going to impact the cotton prices today, right? So with increasing natural disasters, this is going to be a more common phenomenon, and how do we, as leaders, sort of prepare for that is going to be critical. Inflationary pressures, you're all procurement people here, so I don't need to tell you, but every penny counts. We are expected to maintain the cost that we used to deliver pre-pandemic with the kind of raw material cost that we have today. And the geopolitics of it is obviously not helping. Traceability and sustainability, we talked a lot about it, and this is one of the things that fashion is always in the news for, in all the wrong ways. We as industry are doing better, but I would say there's just so much opportunity here, right? And there's going to be, more evolved requirements in terms of ESGs. There's going to be more, there already is, and there's going to be more, emphasis on circularity as to how do I resell, how do I ensure that the denim that I bought 20 years ago is still, the threads are being used, it's being disposed of, more responsibly and things like that. So all of these sort of, disruptions, as you call it, or events require evolution, right? And what does that look like from a, future state, right? It's concurrent planning, it's synchronous planning, it's supply chain digital twin, you can call it whatever you want. The intent is that though the product is flowing still in the same way, your information needs to be sitting in one place, right? It needs to have like an analytical decision layer. It needs to have almost like a digital brain, right? Which looks at all of your, whether it's your demands, whether it's your inventory positions, whether it's your manufacturing, and how do we sort of evolve from, sequence of plan to a more holistic plan, which accounts for risk, which accounts for resiliency, which accounts for inventory, everything, right? More ML-based demand models. How do we transition from a deterministic to optimize? And somebody said, risk and resilience need to be part of your cost, total cost of ownership, and how do we sort of enable that using technology, right? And obviously we talked about AI a lot, so, the key thing that we need to enable is visibility, and how do we sort of then transition from there to automated decision making? How do I prepare, right? I mean, we all know this is coming, we all know it's already out there. Few key things, right? From a technology perspective, the biggest challenge today is data silos. My systems don't talk to each other, I don't have the ability to analyze anything, right? One of the key things that, needs to get enabled and fairly quickly is like a data repository, which is your data lake, your data warehouse that, most companies use today. On top of that, you have like an analytical, whether you have your dashboards, predictive, hindsight, everything. And then from there on, it needs to go to actionable insight, because today my leaders ask me, yes, all of this is great, but what do I do? What do you want from me, right? And you need to sort of make sure that the systems that you're putting in place, the analytics that you're putting in place, do have the ability to give you action, right? To say that this is where you have 10% risk, this is how you can solve for it. The second is, adoption of an end-to-end view, right? Not just focused on procurement, not just focused on demand, but how do we sort of have one single KPI across the organization, because that makes it easier to do a lot of other things, right? How do you have a single version of truth, right? Today, 5 different functions cannot have 5 different on-time deliveries. There has to be one on-time delivery that everybody's looking at, right? And how do we enable, more hindsight analysis process, which helps you improve time over time. And the last slide, and we talked about this a lot, so I want to touch upon it, is adapt the organization to the technology, right? And this has been the challenge that I heard in all presentations, right? That adoption is my biggest concern as industry practitioners, as software providers as well. There are a few things that has worked for me in my consulting world in the past. When you hire not for one skill set, procurement or a manufacturing or a planning. You hire someone who understands end-to-end supply chain, doesn't deep dive into everything, but does know the end-to-end supply chain, right? Have collaborative skills, right? Analytics is going to be the key marketable, if it already isn't, I think it is, but key marketable skill for all practitioners today, right? And it's not about hiring from outside, firing everyone who's in the organization when you're going through a change program, but how do you sort of enhance your existing job roles, right? How do you train and mentor people to ensure that they are able to get to the jobs, do the jobs that they were doing, but more in a value-added way. And this is something that I do often recommend to customers as well, where you need to have local experts and global people with some sort of data expertise within every team. And then there is a layer of data and strategy team which sort of reports directly into your heads, right? So that you have that analytical view, and it's easier to change manage as well. I know I was a little bit over time, but I'll pause if, do we have time for questions? Okay, any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Neha, for giving an overview about the apparel industry.
I can't hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible to
Yeah,
you?
but
Yeah. Thank you for giving an overview regarding an apparel industry. I am more interested in knowing how an apparel industry is managing inventory when we are looking at 2 years or 3 years time horizon, and also return logistics or return supply chain in case of rejection, be it as an FG level or be it as a raw material level.
Okay, so to answer your first question, how are we managing inventory? Not very well, right? As an industry, we are not doing a great job. But I think what is happening now with pandemic coming into the mix and all of that is we're starting to look at inventory in different ways, right? By product category. Now, as a brand, right? I have a certain amount of product which I sell every season, right? Which is probably 20 to 30% of my brand revenue, right? And the rest of it is fashion, right? With my core products, it's very easy, right? I have a certain set of weeks of supply. I sort of continue to replenish it, right? Where it gets tricky is fashion, right? Because my collection is changing every season. I'm planning a year in advance. So we're starting to look at more upstream inventory management, right? Where you look at, in fabric form, I can make 10 products out of the same fabric, right? If I go a little bit up in yarn form, I can make maybe 20 fabrics out of that yarn, right? So we're trying to see how we position inventory more upstream and try to make finished good decisions more closer to time, right? That's one of the strategies that helps. Any other questions?
Great, thanks a lot, Neha.